Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Dean Kamel, also Dr. Semra Atalla, Business Forward. It's very nice to be among friends. I am asked to talk about the sharing economy. And let me just start by saying, how many of you has used Uber or Careem at least once? Okay. So it is very much part of our reality. And when I talk about the sharing economy in Egypt, I have basically 3 points to make. First, I want to show or explain how the sharing economy actually is a newcomer to a classic tension in the digital economy. I teach a course called the Digital Economy and another course on copyright. And basically, the idea here is when, with the internet, digital technologies, mobile telephony, etc., there is a classic tension. On the one hand, people will talk about the sharing economy as a platform. They talk about the internet and digital technologies as a platform for empowerment, and how the internet and others have perhaps moved the economy a step closer to perfect competition, which we teach in our introductory courses, many buyers, many sellers, perfect flow of information, etc., etc. Now, on the one hand, you can look around us and see that people are finding new business opportunities in working using digital technologies. Yet, on the other hand, and at the same time, you will find that the digital technologies, because of the nature, because of the intellectual component, and partly because of intellectual property, they may end up actually perpetuating hierarchies that have existed all along. So you have the large companies, the hierarchies, the top-down becoming bigger. Look at the top companies on the Forbes or otherwise. It's always the Googles and the Intels and the Apples and the Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera. So these two trends are happening at the same time. And what in the course, we usually talk of centrifugal forces moving away from the center and centripetal forces moving towards the center, and both happening at the same time. The reason I give this as an introduction is that if we have this discussion about the sharing economy, about the ride sharing in particular, in the global north, perhaps in the US or Western Europe or in Canada, you will always find a tone that looks at these companies and these business models as hierarchical as ever. They're becoming stronger. This is, outright capitalism as we know it. On the other hand, you come to the context here in Egypt and other places of the global south, and things may be a little different. And this is my second point, that context matters. If I look at Uber and Careem and other forms of sharing economy services, the reality is they are offering opportunities for work, not employment, opportunities for work, and helping, as we say in Arabic, بيفتحوا بيوت. So in that sense, I think the lesson here is that one needs to take a nuanced approach to studying these issues and not just adopt a classical argument that says, these companies are as good old capitalists as they come. Well, sure, they have, elements of becoming more hierarchical and getting larger. Yet, if you look especially in the global south, you'll find a different scenario. At the center, at the Access to Knowledge for Development Center, we have been researching specifically, actually, the ride-sharing Uber and Careem drivers and the women drivers. So we have a study on, I did last year, I did a fireside chat here with a representative from Uber's board, but also I published a paper on the Uber driver partners in Egypt based on a fieldwork and survey with questions looking at their livelihood. And also we worked on a study on the women, the gendered perspective, the gendered approach to women drivers, to the ride sharing, which I will talk about in a minute. So let's look at our context in Egypt. I don't need to preach, the state of the economy of Egypt. I mean, there is a high element of unemployment. There is unemployment of the youth, of the educated, and of women. And we are in a situation where statistics on income distribution would not make us very happy. And the reality is, especially after the devaluation, that life has become tough for many. This is the reality. And it is a situation where you have, as I said, the educated, the youth, etc. We do have a youth bulge, more than 60% of the population under 30 years of age, and this is CAPMAS statistics. Unemployment of the educated, for those who held a university degree or higher, more than 25%. Youth unemployment, 25% for men and 47% for women. And we do have a gendered unemployment. We do have higher rates of unemployment for women. Additionally, we have the informal economy with all its rigor and its vitality and its shielding perhaps Egypt from external shocks. Yet at the same time, it is worth looking deeper into what's happening with the informal sector, as my previous speaker has spoken about. And we do have a situation where obviously Cairo is a mega city. You just have to commute to or from New Cairo, which we all do, to realize and understand and remember how congested and polluted Cairo is. So the reality, some figures, in 2016, UN ranked Greater Cairo metropolitan area as the 9th largest global megacity. Egypt ranks 131 out of 191 countries with 45 motor vehicles per 1,000. In 2014, the World Bank study found that private cars dominate the transportation context, constituting 55% of vehicles in Cairo, with a 7.8% increase in car licensing. Only 10% of Egyptians have access to private cars. And the same study calculated a deduction of 3.6% of Egypt's GMP due to wasted fuel and cleaning up minor traffic accidents. So, et cetera, et cetera. I think I don't need to convince you that Cairo is a big city and that public transportation is an issue, especially for women. So, at the end of the day, really, this is the reality. We have a scenario where there are challenges in the economy. People are finding it difficult to find work, and I use the word work. There is an issue of employment, but also work with the new opportunities can take place. And you also have a positive reality where people are being more connected, more than 100% mobile phone penetration. Excuse me. And Egypt is set to have 28 million smartphone users by 2019, according to Statistica, and an internet penetration of 44%. So you put all of this together, challenges, economic challenges, challenges finding work, congested city, and technology. And, against all of this, you do have a reality. You do have the ride-sharing, services, Uber, Careem, and others. In fact, there's also Swivel, the bus service, and Uber is launching, I'm not, advertising for them, but they're launching a bus service actually tomorrow as well. So this is the reality. You have a number of drivers for Careem. We do not have a disclosed figure for the number of Careem drivers, but Uber, they have 150,000 drivers and around 100 women. They both launched in 2014, expanding to major cities outside Cairo over the last 3 years. Also, women drivers represent a small percentage, obviously, from the total group. So, this is this is our context, and this is the reality that these two, players are there and others. So, what did we find in our studies? First of all, when I surveyed 810 Uber driver partners in Cairo, the typical Uber driver is a male, young, 70% were between the ages of 18 and 35, educated, married, and supporting 3+ people. This is a typical Uber driver that we, surveyed. 96% of the drivers had a high school diploma or above. 51% had a college degree. More than 50% of the drivers randomly selected had a university degree or higher. 19% of the sample were previously employed in the informal sector, and 22% came immediately from tourism and transport at a time where, since 2011, there have been challenges to these sectors in particular. So this is the reality. So when I sit in a global meeting and I see what I see, for better or for worse, opportunities, yes, they need to be regulated. I take all of this. But when I see these initiatives demonized, I think twice, because in our part of the world, and not just in Egypt, in India and in Latin America and others, for better or for worse, they are providing means of livelihood. And that's the important thing. The question is, how can we regulate, yes, and how can we look at ways to encourage that in a way that does not challenge or threaten other sectors in the economy. I have several statistics that I will not go through here in particular, but let me tell you just a couple more, just a couple. Almost 70% of the drivers said that joining Uber did increase their overall income. Half of the sample considered Uber as their only or biggest part of income. Okay? And then quite often what you would get as responses in both studies, the survey of drivers and the focus groups with women, we did with women and Karim drivers, you listen to the women's stories, and each one is just incredible in and of on its own. You listen to how when the women have this opportunity, they are able to provide livelihood for themselves. They are able to incredibly and organically organize their own safety amongst themselves, not only with the company, but the initiatives, the organic initiatives that come between the women themselves and the men, actually, the group of drivers, the groups that they do on WhatsApp and help each other circumvent any safety threats is really quite remarkable. And quite often what they say is they are interested, they're happy to work with, quoting, a respectable company. So I'm not advocating. All I'm saying is that this is what we see on the ground. And it is important to look at what's happening on the ground on our part of the world and see how we make the best of it in a way that benefits everyone. So in all of this, I think we have, the work is published online. We also, I have a chapter coming up on the regulation, around that and the recent law that was issued. But I want to just end by saying that it is very important that the voice of this part of the world, the story of this part of the world is presented to complete the picture. So when we study the sharing economy in different parts of the world, you will get a different story depending on where you're looking at. And it's important to understand and see how we can improve. I'm very proud that the study of the Uber drivers was actually mentioned in الجريدة الرسمية when there was a debate over حماية المنافسة, جهاز حماية المنافسة. And what happened is that in the Garida Rasmi, in the official Gazette of Egypt, the 23rd of October 2018, there was talk about one of the company buying the other. And the جهاز حماية المنافسة, the competition authority, was not for this, was against this. And we're making a statement saying that this is against competition. Remember my earlier point about conglomerates getting bigger, and this is a very good step in saying that this actually affects competition in the market. You cannot have two large companies, one of them buying the other, and you end up having a practical monopoly. And they quoted our study. So this is something very nice, because as researchers, there's nothing more that we want than impact on policy, impact on research, impact on businesses. So from that, I want to also thank Business Forward, because they interviewed me and they wrote about our research. The team is here, and this is all a team effort at the Access to Knowledge for Development. But this goes back to what Dean Kamel said earlier about dissemination. Disseminating our research, taking it to wider platforms, to readers, not just in academic publications, but also in very serious and rigorous platforms that share and provide our studies to different audiences, and this is very much needed. So, so this is really, what I wanted to say. So my 3 points were, just to recap, is first that the digital economy offers opportunities to the large player and the small player, and it is up to us which trend we want to encourage. This is very important, and how to encourage it. If the objective, and I hope it is, of policymaking is empowering the small player, then how can we actually take steps to strengthen and promote that, centrifugal force rather than centripetal perpetuating existing hierarchies? My second point is that context matters. When we come and study the sharing economy, types of ride sharing or whatnot, we need to look at the context, to look at what else is there and how can we best utilize the opportunities that are offered. And then my third point is actually the importance of dissemination and trying to reach many audiences, for which I thank Business Forward. And I thank you all for listening. Thank you.